Right, welcome everyone. My name is Kate Collin. I have the honor of being the mayor of San Rafael, and joining me on the screen we have our fire chief, Abe Roman, as well as Quinn Gardner and Kate Anderson. And I realized I had your bios because we had a meeting last week and I did not print those out. So let's just say that their expertise is extensive, and we are really fortunate to have such a dedicated team, both the three individuals on the screen as well as everyone at the fire department. We've created these communities, or we're creating this community wildfire prevention meetings because of really prompted by what happened down in Los Angeles. And of course, we're going to reflect on what we've been doing here. And there've been quite a few questions that have come in to all of us on the screen. How are we prepared? Can we do more? Should we do more? So we had an in-person wildfire prevention community meeting last week, and it was recorded, and we'll have FAQs that come out of it, and then we have today's that's recorded. So I do have 20 questions or so that came out of the meeting we had last week. You are more than welcome, if you're watching, to put questions in the chat. Hopefully we would get to them. And if we didn't, I can assure you that we would have a follow-up. So with that, how about if I just jump in? Would that be fine? Or maybe we'll just do a quick, before we do that, just a quick bio on each of you. You get to do your own. So Chief, could you just start with that, just so people know and understand the expertise that the three of you bring?
Certainly. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here with everybody and joining Mayor Kate and our endeavor moving forward with this information sharing that we're doing with the community. For me, I've been in the fire service for 32 years. Last 2.5 years, I've been with the San Rafael Fire Department, and the last almost a year now, I've been had the pleasure of being the fire chief as of May of last year. So almost a year. I'm the rookie here right now, but I am the fire chief on there. But really, it's a pleasurable moment to have some time with you. You know, as Californians, we're witnessing firsthand the growing threat of wildfires that's driven by climate change. And the landscapes we cherish in the neighborhoods that we call home are increasingly vulnerable to the longer fire seasons and stronger winds, more intense fire behavior. While our city has long prioritized wildfire prevention and preparedness, the reality is the clear adaptation is no longer a choice, it's necessary. So these conversations that we have, these discussions are really important to us as we evolve. One of the things that I've said is that it's almost like human beings, we're evolving to adapt for our climate now. And it really, if you really look at it, it's a ongoing process, but we're in the middle of it right now of adapting to our environment now. So really, I identify that as being the priority that I have for our fire department. Thank you.
Thank you. Quinn.
Sure. Thanks, Mayor Kate. Thanks, Chief. My name is Quinn Gardner. I'm the Deputy Director of Emergency Management for San Rafael. So that means I oversee our all hazard planning response, as well as specifically our team dedicated to wildfire prevention. And so I was really fortunate to start with the city back in 2018, when we were just kind of thinking about how do we prevent the North Bay fires at the time from happening here. And through that, we developed our 38-point action plan. And then with voter support, we're able to find the funding to do that. So I'm excited to talk about some of the work we've accomplished and also what we need from our residents today.
Thank you. Kate.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Anderson. I'm the Wildfire Program Manager here at San Rafael Fire. And I lead a lot of our open space projects, our vegetation management, and also the day-to-day management of our wildfire mitigation team. So kind of all the projects and initiatives in between there. And my big goal here at San Rafael is really looking at that broad landscape level view of how we can adapt to this community to wildfire and where that's going, and bringing a lot of forestry and wildland firefighter expertise to that perspective.
Thank you. So as we can see, we are lucky to have these three individuals. So I'll jump right in, and we'll start with a general, first question is just really general understanding of wildfire. Then we'll talk about home and property protection, evacuation, emergency preparedness, our own firefighting response efforts, and then really future planning. So really, that's kind of the roadmap for the discussion today. So the first is Californians have always lived with wildfires. I'm a born and raised Californian. And having said that, it seems that fires have really changed their intensity. And so could you speak to how fire starts, spreads, ignites home, so we can understand, ignites houses, so we can understand how to understand this risk? And I don't know who wants to start with that. Go ahead, Chief.
When do you want to start with that, or you want me to?
Sure, I can touch a little bit on it. So when we looked at how we need to adapt San Rafael to wildfire, we really looked at what we know about fire behavior, which we're fortunate to have decades and decades of pretty solid research that includes lighting entire forests on fire and watching to see what happens and how that heat transfers. And so we really look at there's three big things that are impacting how fire is spreading across our landscape, right? Topography, weather, namely winds, but certainly humidity and other things, and then the vegetation and the fuel that's there. And so it's pretty hard for us to control our topography and our mountains and our valleys. It would take a lot of effort, obviously, and I don't think anyone would want to cut out our mountains. And weather is obviously a tough one for us to control. So we really look at vegetation and fuel as what we can control. And what we've seen, and I think what Chief can speak about too, is when we see these kind of fires in LA where we're not necessarily just in vegetation burning anymore, it's home to home, and those are reacting differently, and how fires are spreading isn't just direct heat as much as it is potentially radiant heat, embers, and kind of different transfers of how fire moves through the landscape.
Yeah, correct. And then, a lot of things is wildfires, we look for what the ignition source is. So if we never get to the point where we have an ignition source, we will never have a fire. So we're not worried about the conflagration at that point because there is no fire at that point. And one of the things that we look at, if there is a fire, is it in a vegetation managed area? And if it's in a vegetation managed area, then it's a lot easier for us to make access to it, to be able to extinguish that fire at a much faster rate on there. So there's a couple components on there. And out of all those, we've taken a really aggressive approach in addressing all these issues, both the ignition source, the vegetation management, and then what we actually do there. But that's a big part of it. Like I said, once again, if we don't have the ignition source, we have a windy day, and that's just that's what it is. And what we're going to have windy days, and we just don't want an ignition source.
Thank you. Oh, Kate,
Yeah.
you want to add?
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that as well. Quinn mentioned that, we can't change the topography, we don't control the weather, but we can plan around those things. We know our topography is static for the most part. And we know that, we have daily wind patterns. We can predict kind of these longer range forecasts for windier conditions as well. And we do use that in our planning for the fuel reduction projects and, helping to prevent those ignitions in strategic areas as well. So that 360 approach, we're looking at all of it when we do plan.
No, that's helpful. And I know we're going to get into what we can do here. And I just want to spend a moment talking about what we learned and what the fire department learned from the fires down in Los Angeles. And my husband's from LA. I lived in LA. I have friends who lost everything in these fires. So it hits home on both a personal level as well as professional level. And I know that we sent strike teams down there. And I'm curious if you could speak to Chief, what did they see or learn that we can apply here?
Yes, certainly. And we did have an opportunity to send 8 individuals down there. We sent 2 engine companies, both the day after and the day after that. So this is unique for us. We usually traditionally only send one company, but in this case, we felt the necessity was so high that we were able to squeeze some additional folks out there without sacrificing the service that we're providing there. So certainly they responded on there. One of the unique things about California is that we have the incident command system, which is basically a flawless system of how we manage these large fires on them, and we're certainly a component of it. I always tell my firefighters, we're not just San Rafael Fire Department; we're the California Fire Department. Period. We're part of a much bigger part of the fire department and fire services in California, and as such, that's how we act. So doing those type of things on there, some of the tactics that we use, those are certainly involved. They're definitely involved. I started in the fire service in the 1980s, and to what it is now, it's dramatically different. We'll go back to the 91 fire in Oakland, where the fittings weren't fitting. It was Oakland Fire that had a different fitting. That doesn't exist anymore. Having a command structure as we're responding to the fire, rather than setting something up at the street corner there. We already kind of pre-designate some things as we're responding to these things out there. So all those are really important aspects of it, along with the actual firefighting. How do we attack the fire? Do we attack the fire, or do we go defensive, or do we go offensive? Thinking those tactics through and those tactician level type of positions that we have out there to make those decisions is a critical part of it as we move forward on them. And all those aspects were clear and present as we were responding down there to fight those fires down there with the captains. I did speak to them and some of the experiences that they had. about some of the houses that they saved, some that they couldn't save, and certain tactics around that was, huge amount of information that we got back. If we have any kind of our own fire here, we're able to do that. One thing that there'll be a lot of conversation regarding the water supply there. And I'll address that right now. For
Yeah.
us, our system, the way we have it here in Marin County, it's a package deal where you get 12 fire engines, a couple water tenders, helicopter, 2 planes, air attack, a bulldozer. So we already go with the assumption that there's no water going to be, there's not going to be a good water supply. So we always go with that assumption, and then we augment as we need, as we respond to this call. The key part is that if we don't have the fire, we don't need all these resources, and that's how you can help us as residents and community, help us from avoiding to have to that point. If there's no ignition, we don't need the water. If there's no ignition, we don't need to be able to engage at that level. But certainly in our case, we do go prepared with the assumption that we're going to have not going to have the highest of or the best water supply. That's the way we function here in Marin County.
Thank you. Quinn, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I thought one of the things kind of coming out of LA for me is just kind of a reinforcement of some of our best practices and what we've been talking to folks about. So whether that was evacuation, getting out early, being signed up for alerts, having defensible space. There were articles on mainstream media about why some homes survived and some didn't. And there is always an element of luck, right? Just the slightest right or wrong thing, but there is also a lot that's not luck. And there are homes that survived and there are homes that were prepared. And even after the session we did last week, a gentleman, one of our residents, came up and said his dad lives in the Palisades and evacuated 20 minutes before he even got an alert because his neighbors started the line, right? And so the neighbor closest to where the fire started checked in with the other neighbor, and he has an elderly father that might not have been able to get out in time without, right, that neighbor's support. And so people taking that early warning, leaving early, and that's part of what we outline in our wildfire playbook too, is if we ask you to evacuate early and nothing bad happens, or you consider evacuating early and you went out to dinner somewhere else, or you went and spent the night at a friend's in a different area that's a little safer, if that's the worst case scenario, I would so much rather do that than lose lives. Or have to use firefighter resources like we saw where we had bulldozers pushing vehicles off roads because people abandoned their cars. And so I think it just reiterates a lot of what we've been talking to our community about in terms of being prepared to evacuate, signing up for our emergency alert system, which I think we'll touch on a little more through some other questions, and just that we can make a difference if we take this seriously. And I'm grateful the city and Marin taxpayers have been for the last 5 years.
And that's a great transition. Let's talk about evacuations, emergency preparedness, and how we show up. And you've touched on it. There's been a lot of focus, as you said. We've seen online articles about it and how people responded down in Los Angeles. So curious how evacuation thinking or approach has changed here in San Rafael, and what have we done specifically to prepare for evacuations? If you could speak to that, and then also, and you started to mention this, so no one's left behind. So people that might have mobility issues don't have a cell phone. Could you speak to both of that? What have we done differently, and how do we ensure that everyone gets the message? And then you get to plug the Nixle alert system.
Yeah, I mean, so getting everybody signed up for our opt-in emergency alert system is one of the most important things. And I think that's just kind of a misnomer. People don't realize that they have to opt in to get emergency alerts. And we really do not spam you. Most people sometimes are like, I signed up for Alert Marin, I've never gotten one. It's like, great. If you haven't gotten an Alert Marin, it means you didn't have to do something to save your life. That's a good thing. But we do a test once a year that the county runs. And so knowing, right, to evacuate. And we've done a lot of research on this of where the fatalities and fires have happened as a Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, and using third-party academic experts, if you will. And what we see is either people are dying, generally speaking, because they didn't know they had to leave. They found out they had to leave too late, or they couldn't leave or chose not to leave for some reason, whether that's mobility, vehicle access, chose to stay with a pet or a beloved animal, or just the Midwest, you have to see the tornado before you believe it. And that's probably too late when we're thinking about wildfire evacuation. So those are all things that we kind of can control, right? As an individual, you can make sure you're signed up for emergency alerts. You can check in on your neighbors. You can have an evacuation plan if you're going to need additional assistance. And that's really one of the biggest goals of kind of the all hazard approach we take too. Certainly wildfire being kind of that urgent thing that might happen, but it holds true across the board. I know there were a lot of questions layered in there, so I want to make sure I hit them all. And so in terms of what's changed, following the 17 fires, we have seen state laws that require additional battery backups. We've also implemented some additional tools in the city. All of our police vehicles are equipped with high-low sirens, so they sound different than a normal police siren. And then we can attach speakers to that. So it's a different sound to get people's attention. Hopefully they get outside, they see the bad things happening, and then they can make a more informed decision. We also have what are called LRADs, long-range acoustic devices, where we can do different sirens. We have portable ones that we can take into the areas we need them. We have NOAA weather radios, which is through the Weather Service, and they will do countywide alerts. So they're not great for the small fire where we're only evacuating maybe a few folks, but they are great for a mega fire situation. So we've tried to build in a lot of redundancies. Everything has a vulnerability. And so we're constantly looking at what are those vulnerabilities and how do we work together. And I know Chief can speak a little bit to some of the tactics that have changed, even in how we think about evacuations as public safety entities. And we work really closely with our law enforcement in this space as well.
Yeah, correct. And then we look at this as we evacuate or make that decision. We don't take it lightly. I mean, it's strategic on how we do it. It helps us. It doesn't really help us to just do a general everybody evacuate out of the city. We know that's going to be gridlocked. There's going to be we don't have enough public safety individuals to be able to guide us through that traffic part. So be able to strategically do it by doing it by seeing where the most affected part is, and if it's even going to be affected, and judging it on that, and then try to flush people out that way. It doesn't help us to flush people down, the lower zone and fires on the high zone because we just get gridlock and it gets pushed up all the way. So strategically working that angle to be able to make it sense of how we evacuate and working with our law enforcement partners directly at the scene. That's having an incident commander or joint incident command, both with law enforcement and fire at the incident commander, making those decisions right there, and then focus on those what we call leaders' intent objectives that we have there. That's why it's difficult to really pre-designate evacuation zone, excuse me, evacuation route, just because we really have to base it on what that incident is. What's the wind conditions? What's the road conditions? What time is it? Is it in the morning when everybody's at school and work, or is it in the afternoon when everybody's going home? So a lot of those decisions are being made by that incident commander at the scene based on what that call is or what the urgency is there for sure. And I'll give you a quick example. So I've been at the 2017 fire, the Tubbs fire, and the Glass fire. That was in 2020. So 3 years apart from each other. On the Tubbs fire, really, there wasn't a whole lot of notifications that went out early. It was basically grab your car and go. It was difficult to get some structure around that incident for sure. And since the notifications came late, so there was a lot of gridlock on there. I was part of that gridlock. I'll share this story with me where I had at the time I had a small vehicle. It was a Ford Explorer. I had 11 people in that vehicle to try to get them out of Coffee Park there. We'll go back now. We'll go forward into 2020 on the Glass fire, similar type of incident, but that was a lot more controlled, where it was strategic on how we placed those evacuations, where we placed officers to clear those intersections and push people out of there. So in the time period that it took to get, it was basically an hour where we were able to flush a lot of people out of the Oakmont area and to get them out of harm's way and that kind of. Once again, a lot more strategic on how we do that. A lot more thought goes into the evacuations. And the other part is, being in alignment with law enforcement partners to make sure that our overall objective is clear and the leader's intent's being met on that. But definitely a difference between 2017 and 2020. And, it'd be a shame of us if we didn't learn from our mistakes or didn't learn from previous practices. But I could say definitely in this case, we're definitely learning every time that we see something, we're learning what's going on, what worked and what didn't work, and then adjusting internally for that.
And if I can just add,
Yes.
Mayor, going back to your other question about one other thing the city's done that kind of slipped my mind that I think is so important is we're doing so much vegetation work along our roadsides. And that helps us prevent the ignition in the first place, whether that's a dragging tire chain or cigarette butt or something going out the window. But it's also keeping that heat off the roadway, right? And so if there's nothing right along a roadway to catch fire and to burn, even if you're stuck in gridlock and you're uncomfortable, you're in a metal container, right, safe on pavement where you don't have a lot of combustible things with you. Even when we think about, right, the 5 foot zone around our house, and that's how we want to protect our houses, we can create even that 5 foot off roadway so you don't have fuel, which ultimately could mean heat during a wildfire right against a roadway. You're going to be safe on that roadway. You might be uncomfortable. It will be really scary. But if we can keep people alive that way, that is, a last resort, right? We want to get people out early, but our vegetation management along our roadways continues to be a focus and will moving forward.
And we're hearing you say, the professionals, that we're adapting and evolving and learning from previous fires. And that is something that we need to do to keep us all safe, both person and property. And one way we have adapted already is through the red flag days. So I'm curious if the city or residents have asked us, are there going to be additional policies that we might consider combining with red flag days? Because we are used to that. We're used to now the open spaces closing down or people not able to use power tools outside or the other things. So maybe you could speak to, are there ways that we could further adapt on those specific days that have what was it, humidity, heat, and wind? Is those the three? Yes.
Yeah,
Chief, do you want to?
yeah, I'll start out with that one. This is one of the work that I'm really proud of within the last year that we've taken on and actually developing our wildfire playbook on that. And we went to a deep analysis on figuring out what actually is the danger. Is it truly red flag, or is there an extreme weather condition that triggers that? As we did our analysis, we found out on where are the most deadly fires, what kind of wind conditions, weather conditions are present there. And as we did that analysis, we found a definitive trigger on when we enact certain rules, policies, additional staffing, or any number of things on there. And that's what we identified in that playbook. So now we have specific benchmarks that we meet on a red flag event, and then what triggers additional benchmarks or additional things that we need to do on extreme weather conditions. Like I said, this is a lot of work that we've done internally to do that analysis, but we feel like that is a good plan of us moving forward. It's no longer just a red flag event, and now that triggers actions that we take as far as our city. But super proud of that work that we've done as far as that deep analysis type of work that we've done now to identify those thresholds essentially.
And I think kind of one of the common themes you'll probably hear me say is we can do so much and we can think about how we're going to upstaff or how our ranger might patrol open space. But at the same time, we need residents to think about what they're going to be doing and not doing. Of the significant fires we've had in Marin and San Rafael over the last couple of years, at least a few of them are tied back to like risky landscaping behaviors, mowing, weed whacking, etc. on windy days. Maybe it wasn't even a red flag day entirely, right? And so thinking about when you're doing that type of work that has the potential to be an ignition, and to timing that work appropriately. And all of our crews take precautions. We never work on red flag days at high elevations or anywhere we see risk, but even on some just other days, and even during normal days, our crews are carrying suppression equipment and things like that. And so we need our residents to be aware of that, to think about what their evacuation plan is, to, if that red flag day is your mental reminder to check your go bag or to fill up your car. Maybe you pull your cushions off your couch that's, your outside patio furniture that's right up against your house. Take it inside, move it away from your house so you're not putting that combustible material right up against your home. And so there's a lot of things we can do on red flag days, but we also really need our residents to do their part on those days as well.
So yeah, I'd like to talk more about the home and property protection. I'm going to turn it to Kate because I could see that you are already going to answer the question I'm about to ask, which is the city has already adopted more, citywide vegetation standards that go beyond the state minimum. So if you could talk about how we're helping residents to meet those standards and reduce ignition sources.
Yeah. So our main approach to how residents can empower themselves to improve their own property and increase their own survivability in a wildfire is to start at home. So through our Defensible Space program, we have a team of inspectors going door to door, coming out on request to all of our residences, all of our commercial spaces, all of our vacant and undeveloped lots, pretty much any parcel within the city that's subject to our code. And what we're hoping to do is to meet you at your house. We know not everybody is home, so we'll be doing our evaluation from the right of way if you're not home. When you get our door hanger that we'll leave with you, we hope that you call. We hope that you look at your inspection online. There's instructions right on our door hanger. You can view the work that we've done from the right of way, from the public road. And we hope that you reschedule an evaluation with us and we can go over an entire personalized plan for your home, your property, and really talk about your neighborhood as a whole. We can talk about those evacuation routes and kind of that plan, and really help you get started with that. So that's kind of our primary push in that one-to-one interaction with folks. And then we also want to talk to you about everything that we're doing around your neighborhood as well. Any fuel reduction projects that really help kind of have a synergistic effect on the work that you're doing at home.
Thank you. And I just happen
Um,
to have my door
oh,
hanger
good.
here. So this is what Kate was talking about. If you don't have it, and what's amazing, it has everything, and the free assistance is in there as well as chipper days, has your own report number that you can then put in. And what I hear you saying is that you are here to support us. So when we get this, if we are not sure how to proceed, or maybe overwhelmed, or we have financial constraints, that talking to you, you would be able to help us go the next step. So this, we understand what we need to do, but one of the other questions we've received emails about is how is this enforced? Some folks are feeling like, hey, I'm doing my part, but my neighbor might not have done the progress that I'm hoping to see. So how is the city approaching that? Are you working with HOAs, or how are we looking at that holistically? We know that fire doesn't stop at our edge of the boundaries of our property.
Yeah. Gwen, do you want to touch on how we're enforcing first or how we can partner with you first?
We'll start on the enforcement, then you can handle
Yeah.
the police part of it. So we do, right? We have a citywide standards and laws, and it is our responsibility to enforce our laws. And so we started with a really, what we can call it, the carrot and the education approach first, where we're offering grants and resources and free direct assistance, and everything we can do to help you meet these standards and adapt as a community. And we do have a couple folks that either don't have the resources, don't have the will, don't have the education, whatever it is, that are not moving forward with the rest of the community. And so we are enforcing those. And we're starting with some of the biggest hazards, especially hazards that once removed or eliminated, they're not going to grow back every year like grasses. And there is a process there that includes fines and ticketing and abatement and things that we really don't want to do, quite honestly. That's why we offer every free resource imaginable first, because we understand this has such a community benefit, but we also want to make sure that the risk right next to you isn't going to undo all the work that you've done potentially. So we do have an enforcement process. Certainly would much rather move in partnership and all the resources that we have with that. And that enforcement process generally is focused on individual parcels, but we are also working with our undeveloped lots. And we see a lot of those lots are mainly seasonal grasses and things like that. And so we're really developing our program to make sure we're in touch with those owners, many of which don't live in San Rafael, to make sure they're maintaining those lots on an annual basis so they're not providing risk to the community, as well as all of our larger landowners. And that includes everything from partners and public agencies to like our HOAs and other folks. And Kate can touch on some of the different programs we have, and how we're trying to do that education and really reach a lot of people that way.
Yeah, so before we move into any enforcement process, we're going to try everything else first. So we've got a lot of different resources starting with the evaluation. Sometimes that's all it takes is an awareness of what we need to do, and you're able to do it. We also have multiple resources, including a countywide chipper program. So that's through the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. We can get you connected with that, and that's right through your online report that Mary Kate showed you the door hanger for. But we also have our own direct assistance program, and that's where, when I mentioned, if you can't coordinate work on your own, don't exactly know what to do, we can coordinate that work and have a crew come to do it for you. If you choose to coordinate the work yourself, you have a landscaper that you like, a company that you like, you can coordinate your own work for the eligible hazards that we've noted in your report and receive reimbursement for those costs to remove. So those are our big carrots that we'd like to offer, and that's citywide. Um, Citywide and kind of the Santa Fe sphere of influence wide for some of those as well. That's the chipper program, and our grants as well. So you don't have to be in incorporated Santa Fe to receive all of those. Anyone in the CSAs and Marinwood as well, kind of in that Santa Fe zone, are eligible as well, which is great.
So can you
Um,
speak to, and you talked about neighborhoods, we've talked about our neighbors, if they're not, or the carrots and sticks to have them do the
mhm,
work. But also, what about some of the open space areas? There was a question that we received around the eucalyptus and the up near the Sun Valley neighborhood, but it could actually be any sort of overgrown
mhm.
area in a shared open space place. And if you could answer that, how we are approaching those. And when you say we, you talk about sphere of influence, but we're
Mhm.
not in this alone. We're actually with
Yeah.
partnering with other agencies. So if you could paint that picture for us.
Yeah, so you've touched on a few different things, and I think what's interesting about San Rafael and Marin County as a whole is that there's multiple types of open spaces. There's privately owned, that's where we have a lot of HOA owned lands, but also kind of individually held lands that are managed differently. Then we have our public lands, and a lot of time they're adjacent to each other. So we have a contiguous kind of land tract that's being managed differently by different people. And so a big initiative that we have at Santa Fe is to identify those partners. It could be Marin County Parks, California State Parks, it could be the individual HOAs. Um, and that's about it in Santa Fe. Other parts of the county, um, there's national and federal lands as well. Not so much here, but we do make a really big push to identify our partners, start looking at these lands as a whole. Like we know and we've seen fire after fire that boundary lines and jurisdiction lines are not going to stop a fire in its track. And so looking at the landscape as a whole, how we can be strategic on how we approach our fuel reduction planning or coordinate with Marin County Fire's defensible space team um, if we're inspecting areas next to CSAs, kind of a coordinated approach both in our inspection programs and our fuel reduction planning as well as been a big part of the last couple of years. And we've seen that. And you just talked about eucalyptus, one of our big projects where we have multiple partners and multiple land holdings is our San Rafael San Anselmo fuel reduction project. No easy way to say that fast. Um, but that's a project where we have a big fire hazard, an unmanaged eucalyptus stand with a lot of natural and non-native vegetation in the understory and the overstory. So just a lot of dense fuel. We're also trying to coordinate different land management objectives in there. So working with Marin County Parks, they have a specific land management objective that they're trying to meet, and we're trying to have an overarching goal of wildfire safety while also considering our environmental concerns. The privately held lands, they have their own concerns and their own limitations. And we're really trying to work on how to bring everybody together and create a project that's seamless from start to finish with coordination and partnership.
And I think what I
Yeah.
would add
Mhm.
is so much of the work we do in open space is work that natural fire before we started
Mhm.
suppressing it would have been doing. So
Yeah.
generally speaking, we're not looking to clear cut and remove entire overstories. There's a few
Mhm.
exceptions where we have some really dense young eucalyptus groves. But the hope there is that even in some of the places where we've had to do really dense removal, there's been a few oaks or a few little things we've been
Mhm.
able to leave with the hope that that's going to spur back up more of a native ecosystem. But fundamentally, the same thing we ask residents to do on their home is what we're trying to do at a landscape level, right? We're removing that what we call 1 to kind of 10 100-hour fuels, things that light quickly and burn fast, and that have the potential to really ladder or take the fire from the ground into the canopy, which then turns into really scary fire, right? Fire in the ground is much less scary, much easier for our firefighters to take care of than fire that's in canopies. So that's a lot of how we're treating our open space. And so the project Kate referred to, You can go down Fifth, you can access it from the Mount Tan Cemetery and see about what 10, 15 acres that we've completed. And there's 130 some more to go as we kind of work up the line. But it's not total removal. The larger eucalyptus have been cleaned up underneath, but are staying for a variety of ecological and erosion and all sorts of considerations. And I'm just really excited that we have like a forester right on the team. And I think it's always such an important piece to think about how fire and our forests and being stewards of our land, they're not in contradiction. They actually work really well together when we do it correctly. But we haven't for so long. And so we're just kind of in this catch-up period right now. But we're going to get there and we're making some amazing progress.
I wanted to highlight something that all three of you have mentioned, and that's MWPA, or the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. And for folks that are listening to this webinar or watching it later, I'm pretty sure Marin County might be one of the only counties in the state of California that voluntarily we taxed ourselves through Measure C to do these aggressive fire breaks that Kate just referred to. And so the MWPA has all the jurisdictions, I think almost all of them, in Marin County to do this collaborative work. So I'm curious if you could just explain a little bit more, one of you, about the MWPA, we'll use the acronym, and how that does set us apart and how we are able to do things here differently than might have been done in other parts of California.
Yeah, I think the super quick way to do that is before the tax measure, we had, I think, 1.5 people dedicated to wildfire mitigation with a very small budget. And now we have a team of close to a dozen, depending on where we are in the season, and millions of dollars to put into this work. And that's what you see out in our landscape. And so the MWPA functions as a 17-member agency. There's money that is guaranteed to come back to the people that pay the tax. So San Rafael sees close to 3 to 4 million a year, 2 of which we always directly control. And then some of that goes into broader projects and big landscape that, because again, borders don't matter, right? So just because you're a San Rafael taxpayer, or vice versa, especially in some of our hodgepodge areas out where we've got our CSAs and everything intermixed. And so it's really set us up to be able to do some really incredible work under 5 main focus areas that includes vegetation management, supporting residents through grants, public education, evacuation, right, alert warning, and I'm going to forget one. Oh, deep space and home hardening, of course. Right, so we have 5 main focus areas, and every year we put together a work plan. It's a 10-year tax measure, and we're halfway through it. And I hope people see it on the landscape. Of course, our challenge is it's vegetation. It grows back, right? Everybody experiences that in their own yard every day. So just when you think you got everything right, a month or 2 later, now there's new leaves on the ground, or there's new grasses coming up, or there's new things we need to be addressing. And so we're getting a lot of initial good work done, and then we're moving into maintenance mode in some of those areas. And maintenance does include goats. So more maintenance, more goats for everybody out there that's interested in that.
Thank you. And we know that we don't do this work alone. I'm wondering if one of you, or hoping one of you, could speak to Firewise. I live in a Firewise community that is resident-led. Again, it's all, what are you doing as a professionals? How are you mitigating or addressing vegetation removal? And then how do we show up as individuals? We know that we all have to do our part, and what are the agencies and the resources that we have? We know that you are available, but maybe if you could speak to Firewise or to Fire Safe Marin, and what that looks like. I mean, I'll just know from my own experience, it looks like a group of neighbors that are very concerned about this. And we did work with the fire department, and we had people come out and assess and to do the work, and you get credit for the work that you do. And I'm hoping that there might be eventually a benefit to our insurance premiums. But I'm curious from your angle, that's from a lived experience, and I'm hoping everyone who's watching, if they're not part of Firewise, they become one. But I'm curious how that intersects with and advantages you and the work that you're doing and supports the work that you're doing.
I think you nailed it, Mayor Kate, right? Like that's everything. That's Firewise in a nutshell. It's how do we work together? And for us, I think one of the best pieces of it is we've got a neighborhood dedicated. And it also gives us a really good communication tool. So if neighbors are all on a listserv, or they've got, community flyer boards or anything, we can get information, whether that's about our newest grant program, about chipper days, about the project that's going to be impacting their local park or open space, to them easier. But we are seeing, it really comes down to how do we work together, and how do we just continuously recognize fire doesn't know any boundary, period. And so I think that's a really critical point of all of that. We also have some groups Firewise affiliated and some not that do broom pulls, which we love. We will provide the materials and we will take away the debris. And so if that wants to be how your neighborhood kind of gets along with kind of putting in their team effort, and that can be right financial or labor. There's different ways the process works, but it is a program through the National Fire Protection Association, so it has real weight behind it, and we do believe in it. And at the end of the day, this is a whole community approach. We're trying to address wildfire from policies and laws as you've seen on the dais, all the way down to that one-on-one individual education. How do we help you just figure out how to manage your yard a little bit better, or put in new gutter guards or new vents? So, and it's everything in between as well.
How do you think that will continue? Oh, Kate, go ahead and answer to that. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, and I think just kind of from a ground up, how do we even start this?
Yeah.
Mary Kate, you mentioned, a few passionate people. That's really all it takes to get it started. But having an organization to begin with, whether you're part of an HOA or a neighborhood association, any other kind of already formed up structure is the perfect kind of vehicle to get you into Firewise as well. And you already have the contacts, and it's also another way.
Well, it's interesting as our demographics continue to evolve. I'm curious because, again, the chief, always really struck about, and he mentioned it when we met last week as well, about how we're going to adapt, right? And so, MWPA, Measure C, we used to have two people, now we have a dozen that you just said, we have many people. So, what do you see going forward over the next couple of years? How we continue to level up, right? That's the other thing I'm hearing. We're doing great, but we got to keep doing more. So, when you're thinking about what you want our residents in our community to do, I'd love to hear from each of you. What is it that you want each of us doing? What are you hoping it for aspirational as we continue to address the mega fires? Chief, do you want to start?
Yeah, thank you. Certainly, the first and foremost is building that community around Firewise, or just being adaptable to fire. That's the number one thing. We could enact a lot of policies around there or laws around stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's folks getting together and making sure that we're ensuring our safety. So I think that building more on that for sure. The policies will come, the laws will come. We're looking at some of the executive orders that Governor Newsom has put out in the last week on there. So we're really evaluating that stuff on how much effect does that have on our community? How do we enact some of those policies around there, those laws that are coming out there? So we're still in that process of kind of trying to figure that out, but there'll be certainly more direction from that and more laws specifically. We refer to some of those laws around the building. How do we build it with what kind of materials? We're looking at what's called 7A construction, and basically building construction that withstands the climate change that we're in right now, fire-wise, and just building those type of buildings like that. So there'll be a lot of more work on that, and just doing those analyses on that. But I foresee us certainly doing the stuff that we're already doing, the vegetation management, the home hardening, the partnerships with additional folks out there. And I mean like literal partnerships with neighbor helping neighbor. If it's a deal that it's a windy day, and I'm going to take it's a date that I'm going to go to the city and see a show and spend a night there just because it's a windy condition, and maybe I have a mobilization issue because I have a knee problem or something like that. Those are the evolutions that we're talking about as human beings, that we need to be astute to that as we're moving into this arena of climate change. So that's what I definitely see. And I certainly, and me, Quinn, and Kate have a lot of conversations of what our job looks like to continue on our work that we're doing, very aggressive work that we're doing. And to me, like, I'll say this right now, my overall goal is to make the San Rafael and surrounding communities and Marin County one of the safest in the Bay Area, period, through prevention, preparation, and certainly operation, all those aspects of it. That's my overall goal, and how we get there. That's why we have these marvelous people working with us to kind of figure this part out, including the citizens out there.
Thank you. What's Quinn? You want to answer next?
Find my mute button. There we go.
You go.
Yeah, the kind of what's next question, I think it's a constant evolution, and I think what's been really amazing is doing it in partnership with community. And some of the best ideas we've had, including things that are written out in our 38-point action plan, have come from the community. And so just really looking for more ways to engage and get that feedback. And I think the next stage that's also very exciting to me, and I guess maybe tee up Kate to what I think she's going to say, is how we start really readjusting our ecosystem. And we've had to be so focused on risk reduction because we had so much built up risk over the years. And so we've really focused on eliminate, reduce risk. And now we get to be like, how do we make that as sustainable as possible? And that includes some really I think interesting and fun considerations, whether that's putting fire back on the ground, whether that's how we replant or how we support natives that are coming back into these open spaces. And so at the end of the day, not only are we making our communities safer, we're really restoring it back into this native fire healthy, naturally fire adapted piece that, yes, we still have to maintain because invasive plants like broom, do not go away. But maintaining broom is a lot easier than maintaining some of the other situations that we've, found ourselves in over decades. And so I think, in partnership and taking feedback from community and really looking at what that looks like as a holistic approach to how we interact with our natural world. Sorry, Kate, if I stole that thunder, but.
No, like you said, you teed me up. No, so I think what's really resonated with me during these conversations too is kind of what we heard about climate change and adapting our community. And I think really looking back to kind of that human behavior element of how we even got to this place in the first place to begin with, is through decades and now over a century of fire suppression, building into those wildlands that have been suppressed of fire, and a kind of a minimal amount of active restoration and active management in those wildlands and within our urban areas as well. And so what I'd, really like to see, and we're already doing it, and it's small steps and it's building trust to be able to do these things, is to really look at kind of restoring San Rafael, both its open spaces and these more natural landscapes, back to a state that can handle fire if it does come through, and can also handle fire that we might put on the ground. And getting ourselves back into essentially a recalibrated state where we can exist with fire that's less of a threat to our lives and our home and our community, as we're seeing a lot of rebuilding efforts in other parts of the state. My hope is that, as a community, as individuals of San Rafael and Marin County as a whole, um, is that we're confident in our personal agency to prepare ourselves, and we're confident in the partnerships that we have with other land management agencies, with our fire agencies, to really pull together to figure out what this is going to look like on the ground and be able to balance our community saving measures, that's the goal, with our environmental goals as well. And that's really getting ourselves back to not a state of equilibrium. We're always dynamic, but to a state where we can be resilient if a fire does come through, and that we can recover a lot easier than some other places around the state.
Thank you. Thank you all. The chief had alluded to Governor Newsom recently put out a statement around policies having to do with structures and building homes in wildland urban interface, but also just living with fire, kind of Kate, to what you were talking about. And we have had several questions, which I'll just answer as opposed to putting it on the three of you, because it really is about housing policy. And the concern is we do have housing development and we have housing requirements that are mandated by the state to enable the possibility for those structures to be built in parts of San Rafael. So how does that intersect with our concerns about wildfire? Right now, that is from the state level. We are still required to review those developments. There is no way to stop any project because we don't have the teeth in that. There's not the state teeth in that to say, oh, you can't build here because it's in the WUI. So we are in this transition time, and I hope as people watch that, they recognize this is not static. We are continuing to evolve And having said that, projects that are coming forward that are submitted or going through our public process, 100% our fire department weighs in on those. And everything we're talking about, from evacuation to building materials, is talked about as part of the public conversation. So I want to share that with folks because I know there's a concern. We want to make sure that we're making decisions here that are legal, that follow the state mandates, and address that there's some very real concerns with our changing environment. So I'm sure 5 years from now, this conversation will look a little different, and I appreciate residents doing their part to recognize what do we control here in San Rafael, and you've heard a lot about what we can control. So before we close out, I'm going to ask each of you one more question, but I'll start with Quinn. I'd love you to give specifics about how do people sign up for alerts, how do people engage with FireWise, how do people do the thing because they're now inspired. So if you can give very specifics on that. And for each of you, in addition to that, what would be the one thing, your elevator speech, that you would hope someone would do after listening to this conversation? Whether they've listened to the full 45 minutes, hour or not, what is the one thing that you would like them to take away? And I'll start with you, Quinn.
Yeah, so the specifics, alertmarin.org or .gov, and I can put this in the chat, or someone on the team will. You do need to opt in. And what's nice about the Alert Marin is you can actually opt into multiple addresses. So if you've got a kid in school and you want to know if their school is going to be under an evacuation, or if you've got an older parent that maybe lives alone, you can add that address so that you can kind of keep tabs on other folks. I think it's up to 5. The system's in a little bit of a transition right now. So it's also going from .org to .gov. Both are currently still working. The other resource that I want to continue to make people aware of is the county emergency portal. So it's emergency.marincounty.org. And Nate's going to help me out and put that one in the chat as well. And that is kind of the county portal for all things. Also, prescribed fires go up on there for the most part. And so if you're seeing smoke and you're like, oh, what's happening? If it doesn't seem urgent, you can check that first. And there's a lot of great preparedness information, links to Alert Marin and everything else there. And then to get in touch with our team, srfd.org. Is our main website. We have entire pages dedicated to wildfire, the resources we have. You can directly link to book an evaluation with us at a time that works for you. We try to be better than the 5-hour window the cable guy gives you, and try to get there pretty close to right on the hour. And so we can talk to you and go through whatever support you need. And we'll help you sign up for Alert Marin on the spot and anything else in that sense. And so our website, srfd.org, the county emergency portal, and Alert Marin are those 3, I think, super specific resources that will end up in the chat and again are on our website. And I guess the takeaway, I think the biggest thing is it's not hopeless, and there is so much we can do. And we're in the business of proving a negative, and so sometimes it's really hard. Our success is nothing bad happened, which is awesome, but all the attention goes to the bad. And I really like celebrating the fire that put itself out, right? Because it ran into defensible space, or the ember that landed and didn't matter because the resident had just mowed the lawn. And those are all very real stories that have happened to fires in San Rafael. We usually get a little bit of coverage on them, right? But obviously it's not making mainstream news for weeks and weeks because it wasn't a bad thing. But we are being successful in a lot of ways. And so it's not hopeless in terms of what you individually can do. I would not be, please don't be kind of turned off, if you will, by perfection. Progress, right? Like, this is my field. I've been in emergency management, disaster work for almost 2 decades now, and I'm still not perfect, right? I need to update my go bag. I need to check my food expiration dates. I know there's a little bit of raking that still needs to happen around my yard, but it's progress, and it's every step matters, and it's every step we make individually and as a community. And so I just really encourage people to recognize resiliency is a journey, and it's an ongoing process, but it is well within our control. Even in the smallest little ways, it can make a big difference. And I'm excited to be part of how we do that as a community and how we help inspire individuals to do that.
I so appreciate resilience is a journey. That is such a great statement. Kate, what would you like people to take away from this?
Oh, just one thing. I don't think I can do it. But Quinn's really hit on a good point, and one of my main takeaways is that, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It seems overwhelming when we have, fires in LA, and we've had a lot of historic, really devastating fires. Um, But like she said, it is not hopeless, and there are small, consistent steps. And I think looking at preparing for wildfire year round, now that we're seeing kind of more of a peak fire season versus a fire season, it's all over the board. And just even getting back to fire conditions, it doesn't have to be the hottest day of summer. We just have to have a strong wind and a low humidity and an ignition. Um, to have a problem on our hands. And so thinking about this as a year-round thing, whether you're on a schedule to get things done steadily, we can help you do that, and we're here to partner with you to do that. And I think also kind of that consistency piece is that we're working on this year round. We're planning for the summer, we're planning for peak season now. And then while we're in peak season, we're looking at how do we maintain our interest in this space throughout winter, and that's doing things like this. And it never ends, and we don't have to do it all at once.
Mm, never ends. We don't have to do it all at once. Yeah, those are words of comfort for sure. Chief.
Yeah, I mean, to share the sentiment that both these ladies had for our program here. But this one thing I think if I would share with anybody in our community is to reach out to us. We have all sorts of resources. We will help you sign up with anything that you need to sign up with. We will help you with phone numbers. We'll help you with potentially financial help on some of these projects there. So really, like, I know it's scary to get a notice from the fire department, but don't think it as a scary thing. It is truly, we want to partner with you to figure out what you need in your particular household, what kind of resources you need, information like that. Knowledge is power, absolutely. And the more knowledge that we give you, the more we partner with you. It's a huge resource and a huge pressure that comes off you when you're essentially you've trained, you've educated for this scenario that we're going to run through here of a windy day. You feel so much safer and how you're going to react to that. So really, you want our folks, our community to empower themselves with our partnership and be able to get any kind of education or any kind of materials that you need or resources like that. So really, it's a call to embrace our resources out there, but also, like I said, that's the one thing that I think if people could do that, we'll be able to just have these one-on-one conversations with you, kind of figure things out from there, and it's sort of specific to your particular needs. So I really want to encourage people to do that for sure.
Thank you. And I want to thank the three of you. We today in both this forum and the forum last week, we answered the questions that we had received both through email as well as prior. And I see there's a question in the chat about it. We're going to have more Q&A. We are at time, but let us be clear, we will be putting together an FAQ on the fire department page, because if you have the question, there are probably other people that have the question, and we want to get the information out there. And I'll just close by saying, I feel so grateful that we have the three of you and the rest of the team. I feel really grateful to our residents who voted for Measure C and had the ability to bring in additional resources to our community. When we talk about fear paralyzes us. And having been part of both of these community forums, I know that my fear factor has come down and my action level has gone up. And that's really what we hope to be doing. So thank you for all who attended. Thank you to the fire department. And we really encourage you to sign up with those links and to stay engaged going forward. So with that, we'll conclude this one, and we look forward to additional conversations going forward. So thank you.